G'day folks, and welcome to Great Chesterford Junction Model Railway. This is the update for May 2022, and it's not much further on than where I've left you off last month in April. I've been working on this section here in Bamford, and as you can see, with the tools and everything all over the joint, there's still a lot of work going on. But basically what I've done is inserted this control panel here. It's got all its point levers working. It's connected up with rods, bell cranks, hinges, all sorts of things underneath to get this thing working. And the wiring has all been done. It's virtually been redone, I suppose. This originally was a baseboard from a deceased estate from a friend of mine, and it's been completely redone. I didn't really understand all the wiring that had happened on this before, so I virtually started again. But anyway, it's all complete now. Everything works. All the sections of track are working and all that sort of thing, so it's good. So I've got a small slideshow that can show you how all this came together over the last month or so, and you can see underneath the boards and all that sort of thing, so we'll have a look at that now. Okay folks, this is the enclosure for the second lever frame going together this time. It's only a 5 lever frame, and of course we've had to drill mounting holes for everything, so that's all fairly straightforward. And once that's done, I start putting the assembly together just to make sure everything's going to work properly. And so here we are fitting it all together. I'm using some rods as guides to make sure the alignment is okay, which it is, and putting it together on the bench. So everything looks fine, and I'm checking the clearance here between the end of the rocker and what will be the baseboard, which is very good. It's very close, but it's good. You don't want it too far away. And here's the front being finished off here, and a view of the bottom to show what all the cutaways are like to give us the clearance so this thing will work. So then I put it in the vise to assemble it all, and then looked at what it looks like with its brother. So the next stage is drilling out the holes for the switches in the front panel. So I punched them out, and that took a little while, but it's all done. And of course then we have to cut out the gap in the baseboard to fit these things in. So that was quite a messy job. And then the first panel could be fitted in and screwed in place. And that's a view from the back, so just to see what I've got to try and cover up there. That's the clearance too. I've left a gap for a fascia to come up flush with the end of the panel there. Now the second frame's together, and of course the gap was cut in the baseboard to put that in as well, and that was fitted into place. And now you can see we've got a bit of a gap there between the two panels. There might be a roadway going through there, but you can see I'll have fascia coming down over this bit of steel down to the bottom of the panels, and that's where the road will probably go through there. And then they were varnished and polished, finished off with some beeswax cream before they could be fitted permanently into the boards. And here they are fitted permanently. And the next stage is to get on to actually lining up all the bell cranks and rods, etc. into the system here. So that involves actually lifting the board up in the end, but we'll get to that in a moment. That's the view from the back. So I'm going to have a row of terrace houses along there, so hopefully that view all you will see is terraced houses. So the first board could be lifted up in position where it is. It's sitting on 2 steel rails, and I could work on putting in the bell cranks and rods, etc., hinges, etc., into that one. So that's there ready to be worked on. Now these are the bits and pieces I use. From the top left, I've got little bell crank blanks there, and all sorts of nuts and bolts and terminal block inners and everything, hinges, etc. And I use the hinges. I grind the end off the pin, and I'll remove the pin from the hinge. So I use 2 halves of the hinge, 1 half per point. and then I drill out a terminal block and fit a rivet into that, and that goes up through the point to actuate the point. And you can see how the 3 or 4 parts go together here. Actually, that brass hinge is up the wrong way, but it doesn't matter. So here's a blank ready to be built, and then it's fitted onto its shaft with nuts and washers, and then a drop of thread locker to keep it in place. That's the pink stuff or the red stuff there. And then the terminal block inners are added onto the bell crank as well, again with some thread locker on the threads that hold it through the bell crank. And I like to make them up in batches, so I've got a whole bunch of them here waiting to be used. It's a bit quicker when you do them in batches. And now we're fitting the rods and bell cranks into the first board. That's the first point being done. And the third bell crank in the system there is to change direction of the throw. I like to set the throw up so that the point would be in its normal straight through position. And it's a bit of a process, but gradually they were getting there. There were 6 points to do on this board, and we're gradually getting there. And you had to get a bit creative sometimes with how you position the hinge and the rods. These rod guides here are actually curtain tracks off an old curtain track I took down some time ago, and they work very well. I've got some 245-degree bends in the rods at where they meet the rocker to allow for height adjustment against the board. And this is the last point going in on this board, so it's quite a long run on that one. As you can see, it's come from point number 6 or lever number 6 all the way up to the far end of the board. But that worked out quite well. And this is a view you don't often see on my railway. It's with the boards off and a view of the sliding fiddle yard. It hasn't been like that, or nobody's seen it like that for quite a few years actually. Yeah. Now this is the second board off and ready to be worked on. That couldn't be stood up in place, it's just not practical. So I've fitted a few bell cranks and rods here, and I had to get a bit creative with some of the rods. You can see the angles on some of them are quite unique. And then the system was put back together and the power was plugged into it, and I've got all the wiring done here, all the switches in. Everything's working, and that's good. And it looks reasonably good. It's all been fully tested, and then I had to find a permanent position for the block instrument that goes on this particular part of the railway, so I had to build a frame for it there and fiddle it in. It also required a bit cut out of the back of the baseboard there to get the wiring through and everything, but that's all very good now. It's all tested and working. Yeah, folks, some of the logic behind this system is that, well, you know, it's quite simple logic actually, but when all the levers are in their pushed back position towards the back of the enclosure, whatever point the lever applies to is usually in its most logical position, its most logical straight through position, if you like. So, for example, the platform roads, the points would all be set for a loco to come straight into the platform road. And when it wants to leave and go onto a different road, a runaround for example, then the lever would have to be pulled. So the same applies to the goods yard, so it's just some simple logic I've used there. So that's about all there is to that sort of logic. So folks, what I'm working on now is this enclosure here has, you know, obviously intruded into the baseboard here on Bamford, and from this side is fine. From the other side you can see from the slideshow that you can see the back of this thing from the railway side, which in this case you could, if you stood at the very end of Bamford up here when you enter the room, you can look along the whole railway, and one of the things that you will see is this enclosure here. So what I'm doing is scratch building some terrace cottages, railway workers cottages, to go over this and cover it from that side, so that from the railway side all you'll see is workers cottages. It was suggested to me that I should put possibly a creamery here with some sort of business, but I've only got, I think, one milk wagon, and when I looked at the price of milk wagons, honestly folks, I didn't want to mortgage the house to buy some milk wagons, so I thought, well, I'm going to have to come up with another idea. I would like to have a creamery, but I don't fancy spending a fortune on milk wagons. So yeah, that's what's going to happen, and then, you know, there'll be everything will be greened up, possibly allotments between the back of the workers' cottage and the railway. So you know, all the nice stuff's going to start happening on here now. But I think probably the first thing to do is get these workers' cottages out of the way, and then do some fascias along here to clean it all up. And we're on the way to the end of the build. It's not too far away. So yeah, hopefully by the end of the year it'll look a lot different to what it does now. Yeah, but it's never finished. There's always something to do. So there you go. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this month, so I'll talk to you again next month. Cheers. Gourmet.